Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News Weekend. I'm Dennis Ward. After nearly 100 days of searching for a missing woman, her family now has answers. Human remains were found at this Saskatoon city landfill belonging to Mackenzie Trottier, who was 22 years old when she went missing in 2020. Video journalist Rachel May has more.
Last week, the Saskatoon Police Service concluded its search of the City of Saskatoon landfill following the recovery of human remains.
After 93 days and sifting through 53 metric tons of trash, Mackenzie Trottier was identified. Trottier was last seen in December of 2020. Her last known location is believed to be in the 1300 block of Avenue B in Saskatoon. During the investigation, there was one suspect. However, Saskatoon Police Chief Cameron McBride says charges cannot be laid in Trottier's death.
Through our investigation, a suspect in Mackenzie's disappearance has been identified. However, before investigators could obtain the evidence required to prove their involvement, the suspect died in an unrelated incident.
The suspect died in 2023 from a drug overdose. The suspect and Mackenzie knew each other. However, their exact relationship is not publicly known.
An autopsy was conducted on August 1st and found that her cause of death is currently undetermined.
The Saskatchewan Coroner's Service is now handling the case. They are working to identify her cause of death. Mackenzie's father, Paul Trottier, expressed his gratefulness for the community's assistance and support during the investigation.
This is a difficult time, but our family wanted to take time to personally thank our community who supported us over the past 3.5 years. The past 93 days, in particular, have been difficult. But today, we have the answers we were searching for. Mackenzie is home. And thank you, everyone, for that. Thank you.
In a Facebook post, the family has requested privacy during this difficult time. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
The International Joint Commission has its first Indigenous woman serving as a commissioner. Dr. Susan Chiblo is from the Northern Ontario community of Garden River First Nation and is an assistant professor at the School of Environmental Sciences at the University of Guelph. Mike McDonald has more.
The International Joint Commission deals with issues affecting waterways along the Canada-U.S. border, including the approval of projects affecting water levels and flows across the border, and investigating issues and recommending solutions. Its newest commissioner, Dr. Susan Chiblo, has been working with First Nation communities for more than 30 years and has an extensive background in environmental science.
I have also done my PhD with a focus on Nibi Kendaswin Min, which is our water knowledge, Anishinaabe water knowledge, and I've always had a relationship, I suppose I can say, with water, and always as an Anishinaabe woman and learning about my responsibilities, and one of those are to protect the water.
Chiblo grew up in Garden River, a community east of Sault Ste. Marie, located on the banks of the St. Mary's River, which connects Lake Superior and Lake Huron. She says her culture continues to play a significant role in her professional life.
My understanding from the teachings that I've received by numerous Anishinaabe women is that we have that role to protect the water because only women can carry that water lodge. And so the women's voices need to be at the table. And in the past, there were no women in water decision making, not even non-Indigenous women.
Chiblo says it's important for Indigenous voices to be heard.
I've always been told that we need to be everywhere. And when we are everywhere, then we are recognized, then our knowledge is recognized and our voices are heard. So I'm grateful to have this opportunity to be in this position.
Chiblo was once the environmental coordinator for the Chiefs of Ontario. She continues to work with First Nation communities and elders as an Anishinaabe advisor on environmental projects and policy analysis. Mike McDonald, APTN National News, Sault Ste. Marie.
More and more often, tourism is being used as an industry to help Indigenous communities showcase their culture and share their story of this country. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs takes a look at one fishing lodge paving the way north of 60.
Under the midnight sun on the secluded shores of Lac Lamart, the fish are biting. Guests from as far away as Australia and Italy will travel here to experience the pristine wilderness. And who better to showcase it than those from here, the Klintcho people. But it wasn't always that way.
In Belgrade, this is Tsunti. Tsunti.
Archie Natsiza helped build the guest cabins here in the 1970s. He remembers the disconnect felt by locals seeing outsiders call the shots.
Some of the elders, they don't really like it. The Americans, they come in here and they take all the fish and they just catch it and then they throw it back in the water, and then the fish, they get sore on the neck. And then they die there. Yeah. Some of this, they see them, if they go out on a lake, they see the fish floating.
Up until 2023, Americans owned this fishing lodge. At that point, the economic arm of the Klintcho Nation bought out the shares, making this viable tourism business 100% First Nation owned and operated. Klintcho Adventures Director of Tourism Samantha Stewart says they're diversifying their portfolio to increase employment opportunities for locals.
To see more youth get involved and create a few more positions. So cultural experiences, supervisor, tour liaisons, elder in residence is something we're trying to incorporate as well as we diversify the tourism here into extending the season into Aurora tourism and more workshops, healing programs.
I know where all the fish are. I know where all the animal moose and the woodland caribou.
Natsiza is an elder in residence here from the small Dene community of Wati, some 40 kilometers away.
We're teaching all these young guys, the one that they don't have a job or they don't go to school. So they come over here and we try to teach them how to do guiding.
Klintcho Adventures is engaging with the community by ensuring the stories behind important spots on the lake, like this old fish camp, are part of the experience.
So having Archie and Michelle out here is a great opportunity as I do more strategic planning and business planning to hear their perspectives on the land and the area and the people, and then incorporating some cultural protocols into the tourism offerings here, whether it's something small like land acknowledgements or something bigger like knowing where the animals are tracking throughout the year, how we can work with the community on things like fishing derbies and more day trips out of Wati.
Michelle Moosenose is another local elder in residence. He's excited to share stories of growing up setting nets to feed his family's dog team. He also wants to incorporate the language Klintcho Yati at the lodge.
Well, some places, islands, like, we have names for it, In Klintcho, we have names, like around the lake, Yeah. It has a name on it, just like across the river here from a big island. That one too, like it has a name in Dargab.
The lodge will host over 200 clients this summer. Kitchen and hospitality manager Debbie Porter is not only satiating their appetites, as an Anishinaabe from the Sagamok First Nation, she's taking pride in what she sees as a surge in Indigenous tourism across the country.
It makes it more interesting. It does. It makes it more interesting. And, being as we get all of our people from usually the States, they find that super interesting that we're telling them things, from the land or from this region.
John Simpson has been guiding here since 2011.
Yeah, my grandfather worked here, my father worked here before.
What keeps you coming back?
Well, just like meeting new people, from the state, that's why, and well, I want to know what's it like over there.
A man of few words, Simpson says guiding is simple. Make safety a priority and keep landing trophy fish. Charlotte Mort Jacobs, APTN National News, Lac-La-Marche, Northwest Territories.
Thanks for that, Charlotte. Time for a quick break, but when we come back, we'll head off to the Treaty 5 Summit. Stick around. Welcome back. The Treaty 5 Summit finished this week at the Lower Fort Garry National Historic Site outside of Winnipeg. T.R. Wheatley attended the event where a lot of the talk had to do with agricultural benefit settlements, a topic that seems to be on the minds of many nationwide.
That's my goal for Treaty 5 nations.
Hundreds gather inside this tent. It's the annual Treaty 5 Summit. Jennifer Flett of Opaskwayak in northern Manitoba is one of 2 MCs here. She also helped start this gathering in 2018.
There's over 40 First Nations that belong to Treaty 5. It's one of the biggest land masses for treaty territory, and at the time there was no voice for anything that happened on the treaty territory.
Flett said this event was created so grassroots people could understand their rights as treaty holders. While Indigenous sovereignty is a strong focus here, the discussion of agricultural benefit settlement claims is a hot topic here and nationwide right now, more commonly known as cows and plows. Flett said a lot of the discussion this week is around payouts.
Why are we getting one final payment and that's it? There's a lot of people that wonder, is this not something that should be continuing because it is part of the treaty? So there's a lot of discussion on where we're going to go from here.
Rennie Chaboyer is the chief of Cumberland House in northern Saskatchewan, where they recently accepted an offer from the government for 2 separate agricultural claims.
Cows and plows goes to the nation first. It's the nation's money, not the people's money. But for me, with my nation, we have 2 claims, and we're prepared to pay X amount to each member with the understanding that the bigger claim that's coming will go into trust so that it will grow.
There is mixed feelings when it comes to who should receive the benefits, the band or the people. So far in Canada, 39 First Nations have settled their agricultural benefits, including the community that Summit co-host Ashley Collingbull is from in the Treaty 4 territory.
I got my cows and plows. I was like, Enoch got their cows and plows.
Collingbull, who recently won Miss Universe Canada, said she's grateful her community voted to put some money back into a trust that will be used for infrastructure and services in Enoch.
My nation personally has taken an amount back to be given back to my nation for progressive things and for economic development, just to help us. And I think that is what is needed too. Like, we need as much resources as we possibly can, and sometimes it's up to us to give us ourselves those resources. We can't depend on the government to save us.
A sentiment shared by Suzanne McKay of Barons River.
But personally, I would like to see it both ways. I'd like to see the membership benefit from it, and then I would like to see our communities prosper from it as well.
Canoon-Jaystagon First Nation Chief Tony Travers says his community filed its claim in early June and are awaiting for an official response from the Crown. He said they've been advised of their preliminary options.
On the high end, it's $65,000 per person, and on the lower end, it's $15,000 per person. It depends on location.
But cows and plows isn't on everyone's mind here either.
What is cows and plows?
I guess there's no talks of cows and plows in Sandy Lake.
No.
Manaway Kizik is here from a fly-in community in northwestern Ontario, where he says their treaty fights tend to be about mining and natural resources.
We have our mining. We have the lithium company that is just outside our area, and that too will affect our way of life.
A way of life that's been impacted for many here, and reasons why Flett says this summit is needed.
We're building towards a government
to work together as long as the sun shines and the rivers flow. T.R. Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Thanks, T.R. Shakespeare's controversial play about colonialism, The Tempest, is getting a new twist. It's focusing on 2 characters, but has been reinterpreted using Migma culture and their worldview. Angel Moore has that story.
I might call him a thing.
This is a dress rehearsal from a Dunach. Migma for storm. It's an adaptation of William Shakespeare's play, The Tempest. 16 members of the Sabaganagati First Nation had a hand in its creation.
But in reality, what's happening is you're reconnecting with your identity and culture, and you're building self-confidence.
That's co-producer Richard Tyler. He says Migma culture is part of every aspect of the play, including building a Migma lodge for the set.
And when that happens, it turns into something else that's not acting anymore. And it's not about theater anymore. And now it's more about culture and identity and placement within community, placement within family, and all of these sorts of dynamics.
The Tempest was written in the early 17th century when England began colonizing North America. Madunach focuses on two characters, Caleb and Ariel, and the colonization of an island. Eva Sack plays Sebastian, one of the European characters. Sack says one scene where alcohol is used to take advantage of Caleb was emotional.
I think that it for sure just shows that us as Migma people, we never had any of that, and then they bring that over and it's just kind of like, whoa, like it really took a hold on my people, and it ended up turning a lot of our people into alcoholism and had no ways to cope, and it trickled down to generations, and I know who we blame for that.
Emerald Paul plays King Alonzo and says including Migma culture helps her deal with the triggering parts of the play.
The directors were very, I guess, they were very concerned. They wanted to make sure that with some of the images that are going to be playing in the play, if it was going to trigger us, or, he wanted to make sure that we could take on the role without being triggered and having an episode or anything like that. So
Xavier Taylor plays Caliban, an Indigenous character. He reflects on Shakespeare's impression of Indigenous people at that time.
In the play, you can see its age. You can see straight through to when the play was written and the colonial writing that went into it.
The outdoor theater production is a collaboration with a Halifax theater company called Zupa. Ben Stone is its co-artistic director.
It's something certainly that we want to do as part of the reconciliation and action, creating shows with Indigenous communities, with Mi'kmaq communities.
The play includes Mi'kmaq song and dance.
Even with the music, I've heard the music my whole life, but now I'm actually learning the words to those songs, so it's quite important, and I wish I had learned it sooner.
With rehearsals wrapping up, Tyler hopes the play brings healing to the cast and audience and an understanding of the impacts of colonialism.
The human being that you are by the end of this particular experience will hopefully be one that has a greater understanding of self. That's the goal. So that when you walk away, there's an amount of confidence that not just I can stand up and do things, I know who I am.
Madunach runs August 14th to the 25th, nightly at the Sabaganagati Newtown Trail. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Sabaganagati First Nation in Nova Scotia.
A documentary about a legendary wrestling tour had its premiere in Winnipeg this week. We'll bring you a look at the Death Tour after the break. Welcome back. For over 30 years, a wrestling promotion called the Death Tour has brought pro wrestling to remote First Nations across northern Manitoba. Now, a documentary is shining a spotlight on the tour and the communities it impacts. Here's reporter Sierra Bettens with more.
Growing up in the Mississippiwistic Cree Nation in Manitoba, filmmaker Sonia Ballantyne remembers the excitement she felt when a wrestling tour came to her community.
When I was a little girl, I encountered the Death Tour on one of its summer tours. So when I was about 5 or 6, I met the wrestler Adam Copeland, who wrestles as Edge. And I remember being so terrified of him because I had never really met that many white folks. And so like having this 6-foot-tall white guy with like big blue eyes, I was like, oh my God, no. And so it was really cool because it was the first time I had ever met like a wrestler, and wrestling seemed
Decades later, Valentine's first feature-length film is a documentary on the same tour that got her hooked. Co-directed by Valentine and Stefan Peterson, the Death Tour follows 4 wrestlers braving ice roads and isolation on the 2-week tour across remote Indigenous communities. Wrestling promoter Tony Condello founded the Death Tour in the 1980s. Chris Jericho, the film's executive producer, is among the many wrestling legends who got their start on the tour.
A lot of the issues we talk about in the film specifically look at like how the communities live and how Tony's tour is often the only non-community organized event that comes up there.
Sage Morin is a wrestler from the Saddle Lake Cree Nation in Alberta. Morin turned to the sport on her healing journey after her 2-year-old son Gio was tragically killed by a drunk driver in 2013. In the ring, she goes by the matriarch.
I wanted to have a lot of kids, and I ended up being a wrestler instead. And as Indigenous people, the strongest in our societies is without a doubt the matriarch. And I right away knew that I wanted to emulate, not just be a wrestler who was Indigenous, but I wanted to be an Indigenous wrestler and have my identity right there at the forefront.
Growing up in the Northwest Territories, Des Lorraine, aka the Eskimo-fo, dreamed of being a wrestler, but never expected to go pro. In 2019, he founded Totally Arctic Wrestling to bring the sport to the north.
So we were really remote. Wrestling had only come to our community one time, and it was fly in, and so it wasn't going to come back. So we kind of figured we'd have to teach ourselves. So, I told people that I wanted to start it up, and they sent us a boxing ring, and it was hard to learn in that, but that's what we learned to wrestle in.
Outside the Death Tour ring, the wrestlers act as role models to the students, giving school presentations on topics like bullying, drugs, and mental health. In some cases, the tour arrived in communities dealing with recent youth deaths by suicide. Morn and Lorene say the connections they made with students were priceless.
Thinking about the connections that we made with the youth, it's something that I really hold near and dear to my heart. It makes me emotional, last night when we watched the film in theaters, I was there just crying. I had to go up on stage with my mascara all over my face after.
As the cast and crew gears up for a cross-Canada screening tour, Valentine reflects on the generational legacy the tour has left on Indigenous communities.
Because it's about underdogs overcoming impossible odds, and I think that's why Indigenous people really connect with wrestling, specifically professional wrestling, because we have also been underdogs who have persevered over insurmountable odds.
The Death Tour will premiere in Winnipeg on Friday at the Dave Barber Cinematheque and hits theaters across Canada throughout August. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
That's what I live for. Super stoked to see the doc. Sonia also wrote the wrestling episode in season 1 of Acting Good, which is also super great. It's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this weekend. For news anytime, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. And you can join Carison on Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for your first look at the day's news. Have a great weekend.